The Police Inspectorate, they're called, led by His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary, Sir Andy Cook, have issued a report today all about the summer of discontent, the riots, particularly in Southport. So all these riots happened all over the country after Axel Rudikabana's horrific murder of those poor little girls and the attacks on the other people in that dance hall there. Sad even to remember it, isn't it? But this report, now you remember the Prime Minister's reaction to it. First of all, didn't tell us there was a terrorist reaction. Sanctioned the release of a statement saying he was a lad from Cardiff who'd moved north. No mention of the fact he was the son of Rwandan immigrants. No mention of the fact that his bedroom was full of ricin and an Al-Qaeda manual. So we were kept in the dark there deliberately by a secretive and weird government who frankly were out of their depth. They were just terrified. Anyway, guess what? This report says that, and of course Keir Starmer throughout this phase, he kept saying, these are not protests, they're not protests, far-right thugs, they're just far-right thugs. So they're not protests, these are just far-right thugs causing trouble. That was what the Prime Minister told us ad infinitum, day in, day out for weeks. Remember? He just wouldn't stop with far-right thugs. These are not protests. Right, this is the published report today by the Police Inspectorate. It found, and I quote, no conclusive evidence that the summer riots that were triggered by the Southport murders were coordinated by extremist groups. So, not far-right thugs then. And that most of the protesters were local, so it wasn't a coordinated cross-country effort, were local and I'm quoting again, the violence was mainly unrelated to their ideology or political views. So not far-right thugs then. And it goes on to say, what were the reasons for these protests? So it does say they were protests. Keir Starmer, they're not protests. Were they then just a sort of spontaneous eruption of violence for no reason whatsoever? They were protesting against the migrant crisis, Keir. Anyway, as confirmed by this report, so His Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary, Sir Andy Cook's report says, quotes, some of the main reasons for the widespread disorder were social deprivation, austerity and the economic downturn, and this is the interesting bit, political policies and decisions on migration and asylum and decreasing trust in policing. So this report says that one of the main reasons for these protests, which it says were protests and were protests not participated in by far-right thugs, was that they were protesting against political policies and decisions on migration and asylum. This is shameful for the Prime Minister, isn't it?
I mean, his whole response to those riots was shameful. I still find it very, very hard to forget or accept that there are people languishing in prison for long periods of time who wrongly participated in those riots, but generally as very bit part players. I mean, some of those in prison were only right on the edges of the riots and weren't violent and weren't responsible for anything that you or I would consider comparable to some of the terrible crimes that seem to result in no prison sentence at all. And the idea that those that took to the streets were somehow highly politicized, organized nutters from extremist sort of semi-fascist groups is an absolute nonsense. You only had to look at the makeup of the people there. I suspect the report is absolutely right when it talks about deprivation. Many of those that participated have not had the benefit of a fantastic education or the good things in life and are simply absolutely fed up of seeing what they consider special treatment of those who have arrived in this country more recently. And they took to the streets, and they took to the streets because they thought that the Southport killer was something to do with the migration crisis. And in a sense, they weren't totally wrong with that, were they?
No, they
because
weren't.
he was the son of Rwandan refugees who this Rudy Kabana was heavily influenced as a result of that genocide. We know that from all the reporting around what happened. So people weren't crazy to make a connection between our attitude to asylum and immigration and what happens in Southport, and nor were they fascists.
Yeah, let's stress this as well. Keir Starmer, a big fan of misinformation, has encouraged the misinformation that all of these rioters, all of the demonstrators, the protesters, because they weren't all rioters, were far-right thugs rioting for no particular reason, just to cause trouble. Now, I tell you this, the majority of people who went out onto the streets in the summer were not far-right thugs, not affiliated to political groups. What they were doing was protesting, most of them protesting peacefully against the migrant crisis and the government's handling. Most of them. Well, of course, we're not condoning or supporting the violent thugs who threw bricks at the police, tried to set fire to mosques and migrant hotels. There was a small element of that. But the idea that everybody who hit the streets in the summer was some kind of far-right violent maniac, it's just not true. Most of them were peaceful protesters. That is something that has got lost in the mists of time, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And it seems to me the moment that Keir Starmer's premiership just unravelled, you know, extraordinarily within a few short weeks of him taking office, this is where the rot set in on his premiership, and I don't think he's ever recovered from it. And I know we're coming to other stories later about how he keeps on compounding the errors that he's made all the way through. And this Southport case, this disaster, this horror, is going to haunt his premiership, I think, for as long as it lasts.
And it looks like the Iranian situation may not be his finest hour either, as we were just discussing. Please don't tell me he's going to go down the same rabbit hole, but it looks as if he is. It's extraordinary. This guy, a man who makes so many mistakes, ought to learn how to learn from these mistakes, but no, he doesn't.